Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, Alex.
Let me first introduce you to our audience. In 1998, you opened up a first cake, shall we call it cake store, cake shop in Singapore.
Yeah. Cake shop, cake store.
Right. And you were serving just one simple cake, the chocolate syrup fudge cake, and that was the only product you have back in those days. Right now, your place, Awfully Chocolate, can be found in places such as Singapore, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Beijing, Jakarta, Guangzhou, and many other places.
That's most of them.
Yeah, all right. How did you come up with this idea? What was this light bulb moment of creating such a unique place?
I'm not sure if there was a light bulb moment. I was working, and my friends were all working. We had graduated. We were all maybe into our first to third year in our first jobs. And we used to hang out together and talk about work and talk about life and what we found interesting or what we'd like to change about our jobs. And some of us were very keen to start a business, to test out our theories and try and be bosses and see if we could do things in a different way. The truth is, I don't come from any business background, not studies-wise or family, and I would listen, but I said, well, I don't know anything about business, but if you guys want me to be involved, can there be some chocolate in it? Because anyone who knows me knows that I love chocolate, and I always have been eating chocolate from the time I was very young. I try to explain to people what chocolate was like when I was a kid growing up in the 70s. To us, chocolate was probably like a Kit Kat or a Mars bar. So the first time I started to taste dark chocolate, I thought, whoa, this is different. And I grew up loving the taste of dark chocolate, very pure dark chocolate. So I don't really like candy. I mean, now I call Mars bars and Kit Kat candy because there's very little or no real chocolate in it. It's more like flavors and a lot of sugar and that kind of thing. And although some dark chocolates became available slowly in Singapore as I was growing up, not as big as I think in Europe or the US that you had such a variety of dark chocolate. So I would always eat chocolate. There was always a tub of chocolate in my house. There were always dark chocolate bars at home. And then I wanted to create my vision of the perfect chocolate cake, which was not supposed to be really sweet or really creamy. Actually, there's no cream in our whole cake. But it was just supposed to be very chocolatey and yet light and moist, so I could eat it anytime I wanted and I wouldn't feel sick of it. And in fact, nowadays, people always say they can keep eating it, and the more they eat it, they feel addicted to it because it's the good chocolate roast flavor that's very pure, and we only use our own chocolate for the whole cake. That's the one that really gets to you. So I don't know if you call it a light bulb moment or not, but I wanted to be involved in this adventure that me and my friends were talking about, and they liked my idea. So they said, all right, nobody else had a better idea. They said, let's try doing this. And then we all had our different roles to play. We would do trial and error. We would R&D the recipes, and then some of the guys went to look for a location, went to set up. But I guess my part was really more bringing that fantasy of that perfect, simple chocolate cake to be a real product.
Because you started the whole business from scratch, and that's always the hardest thing probably, right? It takes lots of time, resources, strong personality, obviously. What was the most challenging when it came to creating Awfully Chocolate? What was the hardest part?
Awfully Chocolate is celebrating its 15th anniversary today, this next month. And I can safely say, when I look back at how we started, that it didn't feel hard at all. I think that now it's much, much harder to start a business and to keep a business going. Times are very challenging. There's a lot of competition. I have some customers who grew up eating very sophisticated chocolates because Singapore imports a lot of its food. So from a young age, they were used to eating Valona and Godiva. And to them, the standards are much higher. So we're trying to innovate and keep up by having different types of chocolates. And I actually thought starting the business was really easy because I was very, very focused on just having that one creation. I would say conditions are more difficult nowadays. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but in Singapore, we're having quite a bad staffing situation. The government is restricting foreign labor, and a lot of Singaporeans are not keen on the F&B industry or service industry. So our industries are having a very, very hard time hiring manpower, and we're having to innovate. So these are the challenges of today. Starting, I think, was easier and actually more fun.
Did you start with your friends or you by yourself?
I started it with that same group of friends who sat down and we would talk, and it's the same group that's more or less in it till this day. And that I really treasure. I think that is rare. Yeah, sure, you hear about businesses where it doesn't work out, or sometimes sometimes family businesses work, sometimes they don't. We're not a family business. It's the same group of friends who came together, and we basically worked through any differences we had, and it's so nice to be able to say that we're still together 15 years on.
That's amazing.
I think so too.
But I mean, what's your own role? I mean, you're sort of someone who inspires everybody else, or you run the daily operation? What's your role in the whole process?
Oh, thankfully, I don't run the daily operations. I mean, I like to keep very close to the ground because I always think that in a food business and in a retail business, if you don't know, if you're not looking at your customers, if you're not seeing what they're buying and saying, and if you're not familiar with what goes on to the store, then it's hard to sort of really know the lifeblood of the business. So I tend to keep very close to the ground. I may not run the day-to-day operations. I have a wonderful team that does such a good job at that. But I'm always going to the stores. Every weekend I try to cover as many of the 10 stores as is humanly possible to go to over a weekend. And I'm always talking to the managers. I attend the weekly management meetings, and I do sometimes think, yeah, maybe one day I will step back, and I'd love to see another generation, take forth. But while I see that companies going through tough times with hiring people, or if there's anything that I feel that I can still contribute and give guidance on, I'd like to be involved. There's a retail training happening downstairs now while we're chatting, and I keep track of when we have training sessions, and I like to pop in. So I'm going to be popping in later and quizzing some of the new trainees on what they've been learning, and maybe do some role play with them where I pretend to be a customer, and then I'll give them some tricky questions. So I suppose I don't have like a very fixed role, but I do like to be involved where I think I can help on the front line and in the training and talking to customers.
Well, if we go back again to the inception of Awfully Chocolate, you started with just one simple cake, one product, right? Which
yes,
sometimes is
miraculously.
Yeah, I mean, some people can say that it's quite controversial in a way, because some businesses, they try to expand the production line to have, wide choice, as much products as possible. Do you think that was quite risky to do that?
I think it was, and again, sometimes when I look back, I mean, we're doing a lot of reflection because it's 15 years in a business. So when I think back, I always ask the question, if I were to do it the same way today, what would happen? And the honest truth is, I don't know. I think it worked for its time. Rents were lower, market was less crowded. You could say perhaps it was a simpler time, but we were so unconventional, and oh man, I need to go and find a photo of our first store to show you. Our shop didn't look like a cake store at all. It was just this glass box and with one counter, and you couldn't see anything. in that there was no cake display. And people either didn't go in because they thought it was a clinic or an info counter, or it was just, too weird looking for them. But for some people, maybe the name intrigued them, and they bothered to come in. Or after, we opened a few weeks, some people started talking about it, they started telling other people. But it was a really contrarian kind of concept. And a lot of people did tell us, I didn't really feel comfortable, I didn't dare go in. But then on the other hand, we got a lot of media publicity because it was so unique looking. And why did we look like that? We didn't look like that because we were trying to be funny or anything. We looked like that because the genesis of the whole business was the search for this perfect chocolate cake. So to us, and we were on a really tight budget, it didn't make sense to have a cake chiller where normal cake stores displayed like 10 different colored cakes, and they would be pink and yellow, and there'd be flowers and birds. And when we looked at what we were doing, we said, hey, that's not us at all. We don't want any decoration on the cake, right? We just want the cake to look very dark chocolatey. It's got to look the way it tastes. I don't like it when something looks a certain way, then we eat it, we go, doesn't taste anything like how it looks. So that whole honesty of how the product had to be and how the product was the whole concept. We weren't opening a cake shop, we were opening Awfully Chocolate because of the Awfully Chocolate cake. And because of how all that came together, it made sense that the store was just a physical manifestation of what the cake was. It was plain looking, it was very simple, minimalistic, and I think that struck a chord with people, the honesty of what we were trying to do, although it looked a bit unconventional.
Well, your company's philosophy is simple and unique. Would you say that may be a sort of key to success for Awfully Chocolate when it comes to competitive Asian market, dynamic market? Would you say that this is the key to success then?
Well, you know what I'm going to do later? If we can try and work out the Wi-Fi, I'm going to bring you downstairs to show you a picture of the first store. And then I'm going to try and bring you to one of the newer stores. Now, we've gone through some transitions. As you can imagine, over the 15 years, we experimented with different designs. But for the most of our history, our stores were interpretations of the original. We didn't display the cakes. If I take you to one of the newer stores now, you will see that it looks pretty different. It does look more conventional now. We've got a whole lot more products, including a super stacked layered chocolate cake with extra chocolate and cream in it, a hazelnut crumble, a white chocolate creme brulee. So maybe if you were to compare it with the original store, you'd say, hey, but you don't look quite so simple now. So I would us starting out, because we weren't trying to be something else. We were really just wanting to be that one chocolate cake, but things change over time. And when I look at the stores now, I still think they're quite simple and elegant in their own way, but they definitely look different. And maybe I just need to say that I thought about this a lot before we decided to expand the product line in 2010. I thought, am I losing the soul of Awfully Chocolate because I'm going to sell more than just one product? And I found myself saying, you know what? How Awfully Chocolate started might have been the history, but if I want the business to continue, there has to be an exciting future for the people who are going to come in, and they're going to be the lifeblood of the business. And so I have found that in order to attract and retain talent and people who are excited to be working, it's got to take their views into consideration. And so what you see nowadays is more of a collaboration with my staff and with different people. And it's okay that it's not as simple as the original idea. Um, but I will say, I do think businesses need to have a certain core focus, and that I have seen a lot of businesses that are kind of confused, and you can't really tell where the core is. So that's a good principle to stick by. You can have variety, but you always sort of have to know and be able to say in one line, what are you about? What is the business about?
In the earlier days of running Awfully Chocolate, you mentioned that you wanted to grow it but do it carefully, in a careful way, right? And now you expanded into more than 10 cities and got franchising opportunity as well, as far as I understand. And with Lyn, we've been discussing this because that might seem more as a long-term oriental approach of growing business, right? And since you mentioned that to have as a core is important, the core of the business, the values, how to find this balance, how to strike this balance between expansion and progress, right, and economic growth, and sticking to your values originally. What's the secret here?
I've probably never said this before, but I do think that the secret at the end of the day is the people. If you happen to have an influx of really like-minded, great people, I think that the sky is the limit, because the expansion goes as fast and as far as the people with you want to go. If you hit on a dry patch where somehow you don't have the right people with you, then I think just trying to expand for the sake of expansion probably won't get you the results that you want. And maybe that's why I say that we're facing our most challenging time in Singapore now. The country as a whole is facing real issues with staffing and manpower. So I guess we're recognizing at the end of the day, the business only goes as far as the people can go and the people want to go.
Well, I guess it's hard to find talents for your business, right? Since it takes some wisdom and experience and enthusiasm.
It's not the most popular industry to be in. I think globally, it changes from country to country, but there are some global statistics on how popular banking and finance is. And I heard recently someone was saying they were interviewing graduates, and all they wanted to do was go into finance and go into HR. And go into IT, and every other industry from aviation to engineering was having a tough time. And I said, well, you can imagine that food and retail is kind of at the bottom of the whole scale. So yes, it's tough, but I'm also the kind of person who sometimes believes that I will deal with whatever cards life has given me, and I feel blessed and privileged to be working with friends and great colleagues and with chocolate. And I wouldn't want to go be a banker. I probably couldn't be a banker or something like that. So I'm happy to try and make the best meaning and fulfillment out of where I find myself and what life has handed to me.
I normally start the program with this question, but in this case it's the other way around. What's your background? I mean, I've heard that you did some legal work or university sort of degree in law before starting your company.
Very bad lawyer. Well, I did study law, and I studied law, but I wasn't terribly keen on it, but I finished it, and then I think I knew that I wanted to do something where I would feel like more in tune with and alive with, and I didn't know what that was. So I left law. I got a job in a media company, and I was helping out in some, script writing and TV production, and I found that all very thrilling. And it was while I was doing that I started Awfully Chocolate as a hobby. And then the hobby kind of took off. So I was the first in the group of friends to quit my full-time job to look after Awfully Chocolate full-time. And then as the business grew, one by one, we all joined the business full-time. And when we were in it full-time, that's when we said, well, you know what? We've now got people counting on us. It's not just our hobby anymore. We need to, we want to make sure people have salary increments, bonuses, and really grow the business to its full potential. And that's when we started expanding. But for a long time, we just ran it like a simple, small side thing, and I still think of those days very fondly.
And how many people are involved right now in Awfully Chocolate?
In Singapore?
Pretty much everywhere, since you cover all Asia.
Oh God! Don't ask me. I don't count. But I suppose in every central kitchen, from the small cities to the big cities, you have an average of 4 to 10 bakers, and then your retail staff. I think we've got at least 100 part-timers, full-timers in the office. Wow, maybe we've got about 30. So I can't give you all the numbers, but I guess you just multiply from each city. Yeah, so it's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of stores. It's a lot of staff, and it's challenging. But I guess that's what business is about, right? Feeling challenged all the time.
I talked to some entrepreneurs about one theory, which says that once you have a small business, it's really hard to run all the people and manage the team. But once you reach certain amount of people, let's say 20 workers or 40 workers, right? You feel accustomed, and then you're not worrying anymore. I mean, you feel yourself at ease for yourself, right? What was this point of reaching some sort of some point when you feel like, all right, I'm a businessman right now, I can manage that?
No, I don't think that happens in F&B. I mean, I would. On the one hand, I would like to feel that, and I always joke with my partners that the day that we step away totally, we've reached something. But I think that the conditions are very challenging, and we're still very, very closely involved. And even though we have so many staff, I might not know the name of all the. I mean, we have part-timers who work at the stores on weekends and like once a week. I might not know every single one of their names, but I think it's like being a parent. If you have kids, they grow and they go through stages, but you don't really ever stop worrying or caring about them. And if caring and worrying are flip sides of the same thing, then I accept that as a boss of a company. As much as you care, you will always have something to worry about. And I think that's something that I just have gotten used to, or I don't think that it's a bad thing that I want to get rid of. You can't not worry about something if you care about it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, speaking about the future of Awfully Chocolate, do you have any idea of maybe plan to go to Europe? Let's say open another store in France.
Oh, it's so interesting. I'm looking at my iPad here because I have an email today from someone in Europe, and he says I have to go to Europe, and I'm like, oh yeah, I have received contacts in US, UK, Spain. I remember there's someone from Barcelona before, and it's just that I think it goes back to what I was saying about finding the right people. In the company now, I would love to have someone and send them to Europe and set up an Awfully Chocolate, but I don't have enough staff. So for us, our Asian cities, which are nearer, are a priority. But for anyone out there, we would love to open in Europe. We're now doing a kind of we've licensed our brand to a fast-moving consumer goods brand. And it's just starting in Asia that will do a secondary line of Awfully Chocolate products suitable for supermarkets. It's just about starting, but with that kind of product, I think it's much more scalable and global, and it could be in any supermarket in the future. I'd love to see Awfully Chocolate stores in Europe in the future. I'm not saying I don't. I'm just saying that I need to find the right partners, investors, staff who could take us there in a manner where we're happy that it's growing the right way. I don't want to just rush into it because the world is big. I think it's important that we grow it the right way.
Well, from your perspective, what's the main difference, the principal difference between Asian markets and all the other markets?
I don't know, Alex. I'm not in the other markets. I used to think that our cake might not work in Europe because from my limited experience traveling in Europe, our cake is very light and it's not so sweet. And the cakes that I had tried in Europe, like maybe I'll just say Vienna. I went to Vienna when I was a teenager, and it's the land of the city of fantastic cakes. But I found everything very heavy and very sweet. But maybe as the world has become smaller and more globalized, and maybe lighter cakes will have a space in Europe. I like to think that they could travel, but I guess it remains to be seen. Yeah,
We'll see how it goes then. During the BBC interview, you mentioned that you kind of reluctant. You feel this reluctance when people call you entrepreneur, and I've seen a business card of yours which says your name without any title. What's the reason for that?
Yeah, the original gang. We don't have any titles. Everyone else here has titles, but if you get a card from one of us without a title, then you'll know this is one of the original people who started the business. I don't know. Maybe it's because we wear many hats. We don't know what to call ourselves. One day, actually, just last month, I wanted to print a card for myself that said barista because I don't drink much coffee, but I wanted to understand the coffee culture a lot more because a lot of people come to our cafes and restaurants and they want the coffee with the cake. So I started to learn baristaing. So one day you'll find me at the barista bar. One day you'll find me talking to customers. One day you'll find me digging around with chocolate recipes. So I don't know what to call myself. I'm someone. Yeah, I'm here. I'm with Awfully Chocolate, and I hope that's all that counts. Or that counts the most. Why don't I like the name entrepreneur? I don't know. I think maybe on one hand, it takes away a little bit of the focus on the team because we all have our different strengths and we try not to overlap or step into each other's areas too much. We know when to come together and we know when to step away and go do our thing. And the word entrepreneur tends to make it sound like it's one person who started the whole thing. And I like to take pains to tell people that if it was just me, you wouldn't be talking to me today. Awfully Chocolate would not be where it is today without the 110% involvement of everyone in my team, starting from my first partners right down to my staff now. And I think maybe that's why I think that word is suitable for some businesses where I think it was really just like some one person's idea, one person's endeavor. But I have always viewed this as a team and a group thing. And a lot of the ideas and stuff that you see in Awfully Chocolate today did not originate from me.
So in a way, again, it pops to the same long approach, sort of long-term approach that sometimes Western companies don't focus on.
No? Explain that to me.
For instance, let's say, the quick buck. That's what they say sometimes in Europe, right? Like you want to make fast profit and you do not focus on the core values, right? As long as you expand it. And I think that's the basic difference between Western type of business and Eastern type of business.
I don't know. I mean, there have been food fads before in Singapore, and I've had the opportunity before to pick up some of these franchises myself, like donuts or something, and maybe they would have made me a quick buck. Maybe I'd be doing better than I am now. But I think that just as you said, the business, how it started was contrarian. Maybe we're not pure business people. I mean, there's certain things we do when we say the bottom line is very important, but there's also a couple of things that we do where we know maybe it's not the most profitable thing, but we like to do it because it's in our DNA. Sometimes we start things like we've started some restaurants and they are much harder to run than a dessert shop. They're very challenging, but I think we did it because we wanted to challenge ourselves. and not necessarily because we thought it would make more money. And sometimes they don't make more money than awfully chocolate. So if you look at that from a very pure business perspective, it doesn't make much sense. But I think we are creative people, and sometimes creative people need some room to create and not just be thinking about the money all the time. As long as there is sufficient money that everyone gets their salaries and a roof over their head. But yeah, it's nice that being a bit larger, we can experiment with things sometimes. And oh, you know what's important whenever we talk about entrepreneurship, even though I'm not crazy about the word, um, it's the big element of risk in it. I think that's where the word actually originates from, the idea of risk taking. Um, I think that there's a lot of creativity, but there's a lot of risk in it, and someone has to be aware of that. You have to have that appetite for risk and know how far you can go or not when you take up such a venture. And there is always that thing about failure, right? Especially in Singapore, we talk a lot about having a culture that doesn't allow people to fail. Well, welcome to entrepreneurship, where failure is something that we look at, we stare at every day in the eyes. And if that teaches us something, then I think that's a good thing.
You talk a little bit about Singapore and the current economic situation there.
Because I know this is international.
Exactly. As an entrepreneur with such amazing experience, which, from your perspective, which areas young entrepreneurs should go in right now, or at least think about going right now? Maybe, I don't know, IT or entertainment, education. Maybe you can sort of mark some of the industries.
I am probably going to say something not very popular. If you're a young person in Singapore right now, and if your business has to do with requires some land in some rental space or something, it's probably not a great time to be an entrepreneur because land prices are ridiculous right now. So there was a drive, about 5 to 10 years ago to teach people about entrepreneurship. And I think it was in that context that I did say before that I thought the word and the phrase was being overused or wrongly used because young people were coming out of school thinking, oh, I have to start a business. But there are so many businesses that don't make it. And I think it can be quite a scary experience if you start out. And if you don't have the right advice or the right footing, you'd find a lot of young people getting themselves in a position that it's very hard to dig out of. I mean, the bankruptcy laws in Singapore are extremely strict. So I didn't want to see that happening to people. So I actually told them, listen, when this country talks about entrepreneurship, take it as something to ponder over. Take it as a call to think out of the box, to be creative, to be flexible. But don't take it as you must go and open a business. I think they're two different things. I think that there are many conditions where it's not wise to start up a business. And being creative, you need to know when it is a good time and when it isn't a good time. Yeah. So that I think was the context in which I said, let's not call this word entrepreneurship like it's a totally positive thing that everyone should be running out and opening a business. No, it's such a risky thing. In Singapore right now, the best thing would be to get a good, stable job. The government is the best employer in Singapore right now with the incredible opportunities and the scope of work that it's giving people. They get paid tremendously. There's so much happening in education now. I'd love to see young people get into education because I think the system is facing some systemic problems. I think there's too much tuition outside of the school system such that people who are slightly disadvantaged, they cannot afford tuition, feel that they cannot get ahead in school unless they have tuition out of school. So I don't like those kinds of ideas. I would love to see young people try and change those things in education. I think IT is very exciting. So now you know, straight from the horse's mouth, that I'm very bad at IT. And, I'm always trying to understand it more and to harness it more. I've heard people who are tech savvy, and I admire them. But I also think that the idea is as equally important as the technology. And it's hard to find that idea that makes it so wonderful, that Facebook idea or that Google idea. It's not so easy just because the technology is familiar to them, and that idea is not so easy. And I will say one last thing related to food, although I don't see how it might fit into here. I think farming is awesome. I say that from a country that lost all its farms decades ago. So the only farm you'll find in Singapore is a little kiddie farm or some really small scale things that they bring school children and tourists to. So for a small city state, we import practically all our food. And as someone in the food industry, the source of food and how food is made is fascinating. And I would love it if there would be a generation of people who would go into farming to try and figure out our food problems in the world, to try and have less dependence on processed stuff. In all our restaurants, we endeavor to make everything from scratch. And now we know how difficult that is, because 90% of restaurants in Singapore just buy ready-made sauces, anything. And I suppose that's because there's just a few key suppliers who supply to our market. So whether you're a 5-star fine dining restaurant or a no-star regular restaurant, you're probably getting your stuff from the same supplier. So I would love to see a revolution in how Singaporeans could change the food chain and the food sources and try and get some of that we envy so much in countries like US and Europe and Japan, where your food source is close to you. So is there a modern, futuristic way forward for a country that has got no farmland?
Wow, that's lots of ideas to consider for everybody who's watching us now. Before we proceed to the final part, can you say if you have any favorite book that you can recommend to read? It can be either book or anything, or entrepreneurship, or succeeding in life, anything really.
Oh no, I don't read any of those books. I'm sorry, I'm a bad example. I truly, honestly don't read any of those business books unless maybe someone shoves it in my hand and says, hey, you should read this. I read the papers, which is a lot more than I can say for a lot of my staff. So that's really old-fashioned about me. I read the newspapers, the big daily broadsheets. I listen a lot to world radio while I'm driving from store to store. And if I read, I actually prefer to read fiction, although it's been a while since I've sat down with a book. I did watch a lovely movie yesterday. Maybe the word lovely is not right, because it was quite a depressing storyline. The Silver Linings Playbook, which I think, did it win some Oscar or something? I don't know, but it's. Do you know that Singapore has the highest per capita movie viewership in the world?
Wow.
Yeah.
I know that.
Because it's a small country and we don't have a lot of nature and stuff, so when people want to chill, we head to a cinema. And you wouldn't believe there are hundreds of cinemas in the country, but they're all showing roughly the same shows. And because the turnover is so fast, if you don't watch a movie you want to see within 2 weeks, it's gone. So I heard about this film. I didn't really know what it was about, and I wanted to catch it, so I caught it before it ends next week or something. And I really enjoyed it. Yeah, so that's the biggest chill thing I've done.
Thanks.
In a couple of weeks.
Maybe someone will go today. At the end of our program, we call it table tennis set of questions. When we ask you a set of simple questions with options as an answers, and you can pick up any of them.
Oh my god. And then somebody's going to write them down and do a psychology test on me, right?
Well, we're gonna sell the research data anyway. No, just
You know,
kidding.
I have a lot of part-time students, and they ask me whether I will help them with their school projects. So sometimes if I can, or if they're very good part-timers who always show up on time and have good attitudes, then I'm very happy to oblige. And there was this one project, and at the end of the whole project, he interviewed me for like hours and talked about business and marketing. He sent me a psychology test or a personality test or something, and I refused to do it. And I said, listen, this is hogwash. I'm not going to take a test for you to analyze what personality you have to be a business person. So the most important thing you need to be is you need to be hard work. I know that's crappy English, but you know, I don't know anyone who got anywhere without the hard work and the resilience. You are going to have difficulties. You're going to have horrible days. You're going to have days where nothing goes right. But that's in every job, right? And the question of success is, how do you overcome it? Do you overcome it? You know, do you just grit your teeth and get through? And I said it's not to do with my personality type or anything. The most important common denominator is the resilience, the fortitude.
Right. That's the final part, by the way. We always put the advice for entrepreneurs at the very
Okay,
end.
that's the final part now, so I don't need to do the final part.
And so the pre-final part is table tennis set of questions.
Alright, if I don't like the questions, I'm not going to answer them.
You can skip them if you'd like, but you will love them. Steve Jobs or Bill Gates?
Bill Gates, because he doesn't have Facebook and neither do I. I don't know if Steve Jobs has Facebook, but I read that Bill Gates says he doesn't have Facebook.
iPhone?
Wait a minute, I can't offend people who are watching here because they all have Facebook. I only don't have Facebook because I'm quite bad with Facebook. I'm quite bad with techie things. And I would feel an obligation to maintain it like a diary. And if I feel I can't do it well, then I probably don't want to like do it for the sake of because everyone is doing it. So I always tell people, my friends, anyone who wants to reach me can find me very easily through other means, just like you have found me, right? Just because I didn't happen to have a Facebook, it doesn't stop me from being accessible. And I would actually rather know maybe a smaller group of people, but know them genuinely rather than, you know, just I have Facebook. Or that sort of thing. That's not important to me. Yes.
Great.
Oh, but Steve Jobs is great too.
They both equally awesome.
I use iPhone and iPad. I don't even have a LAN computer, so it's so complicated. Borrowing a computer.
So you envision the second question, what type of phone? iPhone, Android, Windows?
God. I used to use a BlackBerry for many, many years, but as I got older, my eyesight deteriorated, and it didn't have this fantastic function. Wait, where's my camera? So I can't find camera. You know how the iPhones have this fantastic function where you can enlarge everything? I would see people do that, and I couldn't do that on my BlackBerry, and I swear that's the only reason why I changed to iPhone. But I have been using the iPhone for a few years, and I'm very boring. There are no games on my phone, and I don't let my children play with it because I said, this is mommy's work phone. It's only for work. And it's only for work. I'm a dinosaur. I'm a dinosaur in the wrong era. I love technology and I encourage it. My kids are really good at it, but I find my pleasures in other things strangely, and I really just use the technology for the function that I need it for, and I tend not to go outside of the function and play Angry Birds and stuff. I don't know. I have other hobbies.
Fair enough. You answered that before, but still, tea or coffee?
Tea.
Going to a party or staying home?
Depends. It depends, right? Depends on who's going to the party and what the party is.
Fruits and vegetables or fast food?
Oh, definitely fruits and vegetables. Chocolate is my big sin. Else I'm super healthy.
Which car, BMW or Mercedes?
Okay, no car is important to me as long as it has wheels and it can move. Sorry.
Egg or chicken, what came first?
I just thought about this the other day. I think the chicken had to come first for some reason.
Really?
Yeah, I'm convinced now. I don't know why I was thinking of that, but I'm convinced, right? You need the fella first to produce the egg. Else, where did the egg drop out from? Now you're going to ask me where the chicken comes from, but I don't know. That's just my answer.
Great. Being married or not being married?
Being married is wonderful.
God believer or atheist?
Depends on you. Peace is most important of all.
Great.
If the God believer or the atheist do not have peace in their hearts based on their beliefs, then it can't be right. So ultimately, the one that leads you to the right way is the one that promotes peace and understanding among all.